The thing about dryland is that it doesn't look like much. I've tried explaining this to people who didn't grow up reading it, and I've mostly given up. You either know what cracked hardpan looks like the morning before a bloom event, or you don't. You either know what a particular shade of pale rust in the subsoil means about the moisture column underneath, or you don't. The Kethavar survey team, I can tell you with some confidence, did not. They were chitinous, the Kethavar. Hard outer casing the color of old amber, 6 limbs used interchangeably for movement and manipulation, compound eyes that processed more light frequencies than I'd ever need. Their sensor arrays could map a soil column to 3 centimeter resolution from orbit. Their atmospheric modeling suite had been running continuous update cycles for 11 days before we even entered the target sector's gravity well. Their lead survey commander, Veth Arak, had 3 advanced credentials in planetary surface assessment and spoke with the unhurried confidence of someone who has never once been surprised by a piece of ground. I was the contracted human surface observer. My job was to ride along on the surface passes, note anything the sensors flagged as anomalous, and file a supplemental report at the end of each corridor run. Standard joint mission protocol. I had a folding field notebook, a hand probe, and a set of soil cores I'd been running since we broke orbit. Veth Arak noticed the notebook on the second day. He noticed it the way you might notice a child carrying a stick and pretending it was a measuring instrument. Not with hostility, with a kind of warm, patient amusement that was, if anything, harder to sit with than hostility would have been. The surface observer maintains a manual log, he said to his second, Kethovar, as if I weren't standing 3 feet away. The translator caught the sub-register of his vocalization, the part Kethovar used when they were being polite about something they found baffling. Kethovar made the clicking sound that meant agreement with a superior's assessment of a mildly absurd situation. It's a habit, I said. Veth Arak turned one of his compound eye clusters toward me. The sensor array processes 11,000 discrete data points per surface kilometer, he said. Continuously. Yep, I said. Your notebook. I write slower than that, I said. I'm aware. He made the clicking sound himself, then polite amusement. I wrote it down. The thing about the Kethavar sensor suite was that it was genuinely exceptional. I'm not being sarcastic. Their moisture mapping was the best I'd worked alongside, and I'd worked alongside a lot of survey equipment in 17 years of this. The array pulled real-time atmospheric column data, cross-referenced it against historical precip cycles going back 80 years, ran predictive bloom risk modeling on a 4-hour update interval. Veth Arak pulled the corridor risk summary every morning at the start of shift, and delivered it with the quiet satisfaction of someone reading a settled matter aloud for the record. Corridor 7 through 12, he said on day 4. Moisture deficit across all 6 corridors. No significant deviation from seasonal baseline. Bloom probability assessed at below 3% for the current 14-day window. Survey schedule will proceed as filed. I was looking at the surface feed from the previous day's low-altitude pass. Corridor 9, specifically, the hardpan. There is a particular way hardpan cracks when the moisture column underneath it is under pressure. Not surface moisture, the column, the deep water moving through the substrate. The cracks don't go straight. They angle. They make these small, curved fissures that follow the pressure gradient. And if you've been reading dryland long enough, you know what they're telling you. Corridor 9's hardpan was telling me something. I wrote it down. Then I pulled up the mission file and added a supplemental note under the Day 4 sensor summary. Surface crack morphology in Corridor 9, consistent with deep moisture column convergence. Possible bloom window opening within 72-96 hours. Recommend survey hold for Corridors 8 through 10, pending reassessment. Veth Arak read it at the end of shift. This is based on the surface visual feed, he said. And the crack patterns, I said. The sensor array has assessed Corridor 9 as below 3% bloom probability. I know. The array's moisture modeling accounts for deep substrate column movement. It averages the readings over 4-hour intervals, I said. Bloom window convergence can develop in the gaps. He looked at my note for a while. Then he looked at his sensor summary. The sensor summary was 53 pages long, and had been produced by 11,000 data points per surface kilometer. My note was 2 sentences. "I'll log your observation to the appendix," he said. "That's fine," I said. He logged it to the appendix. I kept watching Corridor 9. On day 5, I did a low-altitude pass specifically to get eyes on the hardpan again. The angle of the cracks had changed, not dramatically. Enough. I took 3 soil cores and ran them by hand, the way my father taught me, pressing the material between my fingers and reading the texture changes through the depth profile. The middle core had a shear line at about 40 centimeters that had not been there the day before. Water moving. Not much. Enough. I wrote it down and filed another note. Crack angle progression and soil shear at 40 centimeters. Corridor 9, confirmed deep column movement. Bloom window estimate revised. 48 to 72 hours. Recommend immediate survey hold. Corridors 8 through 11. He was very polite about it. He showed me the updated sensor summary, which had processed another 2 days' worth of 11,000 data points per kilometer and still assessed bloom probability below 3% for the current window. "The array has not detected the column movement you're describing," he said. "It's averaging over 4-hour intervals," I said again. "The movement is happening inside the interval. Our modeling accounts for interval variance." "I know." He looked at me for a moment. Kethovar made the clicking sound. "Your observation is noted," Vetharak said. "It will remain in the appendix." "That's fine," I said. We ran the Corridor 9 pass on schedule the following morning. I sat in the observer's seat on the flight deck and watched the surface feed and did not say anything, because there wasn't anything left to say that I hadn't already put in the appendix. The bloom opened at 11:47 station time. It didn't announce itself. That's the other thing about dryland blooms. They're not dramatic until suddenly they are. One moment the sensor array was reading a normal moisture gradient across Corridor 9. The next moment, it was reading a wall of biological material, rising through the substrate, faster than the modeling suite had predicted was possible, because the modeling suite had been averaging its data over 4-hour windows and missing the convergence that had been building in the gaps for 3 days. The array alarm went at 11:48. Vetharak was on the flight deck in under a minute. He looked at the surface feed. He looked at the sensor readings. He pulled up the risk assessment and looked at that. Then he looked at the appendix, where my notes were filed. He was quiet for a long time. The bloom crossed Corridor 9 and was into Corridor 10 by 11:55. It crossed Corridor 11 by 12:03. By 12:30, it had covered everything we'd scheduled for the next 4 survey days, and Vetharak had already filed the mission abort notice with the Joint Operations Board. I was writing up my notes from the previous day's observations. I had a lot of them. Kethovar came and stood near me at 12:45. He didn't say anything for a while. I kept writing. "How did you know?" he said, finally. The translator caught a register I hadn't heard from him before. Not polite amusement, something quieter. "The cracks," I said. "The sensor array." "The sensor array measures," I said. "It's very good at measuring." He waited. "My grandmother farmed dryland," I said, "her mother before her. You learn what the ground is trying to tell you. It takes a while." I closed the notebook and looked at him. Takes longer than 11,000 data points per kilometer anyway. He made a sound I didn't have a translation for. Not the clicking sound. Something else. The mission abort report was filed at 13:10. At 13:22, Vetharak submitted a revision to the survey record, reclassifying my Day 4 and Day 5 supplemental notes from Appendix, Surface Observer, non-essential to primary mission record, predictive assessment. He did it quietly, without comment, and I didn't see it until I pulled my own copy of the file the following morning. I thought about saying something. I didn't. I started writing up Corridor 14 instead. The hardpan there had an angle I wanted to get eyes on before Vetharak ran his next risk summary. It seemed like the kind of thing worth noting.